Hogwarts Legacy is undoubtedly a very detailed game, and I'm still discovering things about it just from the few hours I played, like how students will remember you if you were helpful or not towards them. I think we're only just scratching the surface here, but today we're going to go over even more important details, as well as answering some of your biggest questions. Also, a quick reminder that there's still time to participate in the 2 Hogwarts Legacy Deluxe Edition giveaways that I'm doing right now. You only have to be subscribed to the channel, leave a like on the video, and reply with a comment below. The winners will be announced a day or two before the early access launch, so you have enough time to also prepare. But let's get started with a closer look at your relationships, because I compared my footage from Lenora's Moth quest with some of the others, and it definitely seems that there can be slightly different results depending on your dialogue choices. So once you do get the moth in place, you can talk to her and she will ask you how did you manage to solve it, at which point you're presented with 2 options: either be friendly and tell her, or blame her lack of skill and keep it a secret. Choosing the unfriendly dialogue will obviously make her mad at you, and she will not hesitate to let you know about it. In fact, if you bump into her sometimes after that, she's still going to be pissed at you and will make it very clear. If you, on the other hand, go with the friendly option, not only do you let her know how to solve the puzzle herself, but she'll be thankful and even make comments on another student who similarly has a knack at solving puzzles just like you. Now, good to note is that this doesn't seem to lock you out of any rewards no matter which path you choose, and at least for this quest you still get the Cobalt Regalia and the same amount of XP when finishing it. Also interesting is that finishing this quest in the demo opened up a relationship quest challenge at the top, which could possibly hint towards some kind of friendship level that we have to keep in mind when completing these missions. At least in the case of Lenora, her quest chain also continues later on, because there are plenty more pictures affected by the strange darkness around the castle, so maybe it's a good idea to be friendly with her at first. Also, it's not certain if being mean or friendly will influence any of your standings with these characters or not, but it's probably good to maybe make some backup saves just in case. But there is one dilemma that I have about being completely good or completely evil in this game, because now that I think about it, being completely good might be much harder than otherwise. For example, if we take a look at our Ancient Magic Ultimate spell, it doesn't look like we have a say into which of its versions is casted. So it can either be the Harmless Polymorph into the Chicken spell, but also the Shattering Lightning Strike, or even a complete disintegration of the enemy. So theoretically, either of the last 2 are potentially on the same level of brutality as literally any of the unforgivable curses, which raises an ethical question: are we still the good guys in all of this? The in-game characters don't seem to mind when we're doing this with the ancient attacks, but they do so with the unforgivable curses, which kinda gets this shocked remark out of them when you do it. So unless there's a way to change those effects somehow in-game, or unless you decide to just not use the Ancient Ultimate, you can't really be completely, well, good in this case without going a bit into the evil territory, which also makes me believe that maybe it's canon to end up being evil in Hogwarts Legacy, but let me know down below what you think about that. Now, finishing these quests and leveling up is also more interesting now that we got to see the end of the previews and also make better sense of the skill tree menus from the gameplay reveals last year. So once you finish a quest, you get the XP, which in this case when I hit level 20 also provided 1 extra talent point. Looking at the talent tree from last year, these talents can be spent into 5 different skill categories, starting with the Room of Requirement ones on the right side, then Stealth, Core in the middle, and then I would assume we have the Dark Arts, plus a final one onto the far left that I'm not really sure we have a name for yet. Good to note is that even though this footage was captured at around level 12, there are 15 points distributed between each of the different subcategories, maybe hinting that maybe at the start of the game we might get to start with some extra skill points, or that there are other ways to acquire them besides just leveling up. There's also 50 of them in total, implying that the max level in Hogwarts Legacy should be 50. But since the core tree is the one that improves your overall effectiveness, I'm expecting this is where we'll want to spend some of the starting points, like maybe that cool dash animation from the previews is something we can get to replace our normal dodge with, in this case if we go with the middle tree. and maybe the final tree might also be the one that improves our existing spells with the extra power, given how it does have additional points invested into it. At least during the demo, my Depulso attacks were much stronger because it was upgraded to have an AoE throwback when casting it, similarly to how Incendio gets that huge ring of fire when it's being upgraded. For the Dark Arts tree, there's one effect that we know of, which is this green X curse applied on targets when performing attacks on them. The more of them you tag, the better, because every single attack against just one of them will bounce between all of the tagged targets. But speaking of levels, it looks like not all areas will be accessible at once, at least not inside of the castle. During the demo, I saw a lot of level locked rooms, which implied that I would need to progress a bit more in the game before being able to access them, but it's not true for all of them. Some of these doors only showed the locked status, missing the level 1, so it's likely that these are openable without having to reach a certain level, but in this case maybe the player lacked the skill required for it. Most likely Alohomora, which we did get to use but much later at around level 19. This would be the equivalent of Skyrim's lockpicking, just slightly more complicated by the looks of it. So maybe once we do unlock it at one point in the story, we're gonna be able to come back to these non-level locked rooms and open them to gain access, probably to something cool. And speaking of that, Revelio helps a ton to see what's behind many of these locked areas, but what's revealed is also color-coded contextually to better understand what you're looking at. So if you see an item or structure marked with the color blue, this implies it's an interactable object. This could range from the ones providing field guide pages to quest objectives and even hidden mechanisms. The yellow ones are basically the loot containers, so you'll want to always keep an eye out for these, especially since they provide some really awesome loot. And there's also the red ones, obviously giving an easy understanding of where enemies are situated, especially if you're behind walls or if they are out of line of sight. Obviously that doesn't come without limitations, and there were a few that I noticed in the demo. First, at least when it comes to the broom, you can't land everywhere you want, but you will need a clear landing area. It doesn't have to be too big, but if you're trying to get in a very tight spot or a very pointy roof, it might not work, at least not with this kind of mount. Also, there are obvious limitations where you can bring your mount, with the castle interior being one of these limitations, but there are areas outside of that also have them, especially puzzle related ones or maybe quest related ones. If there's something important happening, the game usually wants you to dismount and then proceed with a more hands-on approach, which I don't really mind, to be honest, because this means I can more easily spot these areas and I will know that there's something important over there that I do have to uncover. Another limitation is that some of the areas of the castle are actually loading in the background, specifically when heading from an inside location to an outside one, like for example a balcony, terrace or bridge. So you will see this very short fraction of a second loading animation before you're led to open those doors. Given the castle's massive setting, that's probably the best way they could achieve something like this without sacrificing too much performance. Now, as far as enemies go, when fighting the Animagus, I noticed a game prompt referring to a menu that lets us learn more about enemy abilities and weaknesses. I didn't see that in game, but I'd imagine later on a compendium like that would help a ton, especially to better prepare your most useful spells or maybe avoid some of the incoming attacks. And speaking of avoiding stuff, enemies can cast stuff like Levioso on you, case in which you can have a few options. If it does happen, there's a chance for you to break out of it if you press the right button. So as you're lifted up in the air, you do need to press a button at random, whichever appears, to break out of it sooner. Otherwise, if you don't, you're kind of stuck for the entire duration, which can be quite long. In combat, especially when you're dodging, this might prove a bit tricky, as you might spam triangle or circle a ton to block or just dodge, which, yeah, it can be quite annoying. Also, on stealth side, it doesn't seem that the AI is as dumb as I thought initially, and they can indeed attack you if you mess around too much. Specifically, if they do notice one of their friends being taken out, they will come to investigate, and if you stick around for too close, they will also eventually see you. Furthermore, if you're still in combat and enter stealth while they have clear vision over you, this is not going to work, and they will basically know your precise location, case in which they will deal damage to you. There were of course a lot more hidden interactions, like even when out randomly in the wild, I noticed that you can use a skipping stone kind of spell to just throw rocks over the water, which I found nice because it's a small distraction, but it adds a ton when there's multiple of them at seemingly every corner. Also, some of the NPCs moving around the front castle area, even though I was in the same location at the same time as some of the other previewers, what was present in mine wasn't necessarily present in others and vice versa, including this NPC with a cloud over its head. It also doesn't seem that potions all have to be crafted at all times. At least some of them can just be found randomly as drops from looting. One of the best examples is with the Wiggenweld potion, the healing potion, which appears to drop quite abundantly from a lot of the containers and even random enemies. For the others, not so much, and they might require to be crafted, but at least the game's pause menu offers a pretty nice and intuitive recipe neatly right there on to the left side that you can quickly check and then just get the ingredients to craft it right away. For attack plants, that doesn't apply, since obviously you just have to get these and then plant them and grow them at the growing pots back at the castle. This is it with the details, of course. Let me know down below if there's any other questions that you might want me to answer. I'm gonna, of course, cover them as much as I can. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and until next time.